Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. In this video, I'm going to talk about Casper, what I believe is taking place on today's chart. I'm going to throw out some key concepts that I believe is vital for you to understand, especially in today's environment. And I'm also going to talk about what is coming down the pike. So buckle up and let's dive in. So let's bring this chart to life with an arrow. Now, as you can see, Casper has been in a decline. Now, in my last video, you can watch that over here, I talked about how Casper was at or near the bottom of this decline, or the end of this decline. That was, I believe, somewhere around here. As you can see, it's since then declined a bit more. Now, I still believe that we are at or near, I'm sounding like a broken record, the bottom of this structure. I will show you why I believe that to be the case. But first, I want to talk about the bigger picture. This is on TradingView, and I am zoomed out on a day candle. I just wanted to point out that TradingView now has the beginning starting in April 2021. This is the same time that CoinTrader Pro also has Casper starting. The difference is TradingView, you're stuck with day candles when you go back this far, at least on the tier of TradingView that I have, whereas CoinTrader Pro, and that is charts.cointrader.pro, you can go back on a small time frame. This is on an hour time frame, back to the very beginning of the chart. So now that we're here, let's talk about the bigger picture, the macro repetitive structure. Now, for those of you who follow this channel, you're aware of this structure. For those of you who are new, I'll briefly touch on it. And I'm going to show you today's structure as it's playing out now after this. So it starts with a move up, and that is a bull run structure. So this move up, and this giant of a move up right here that went to $40 is all the same structure. Okay, so I zoomed in to the beginning again. So after this move up, price retreats. It does this structure, which consists of several waves. After this completes, it breaks to the downside and comes to a termination. The termination point of this break to the downside is a bounce. We could see that here. Casper then enters a new season, if you will, which is a range-bound, kind of a sideways range-bound time. And this time consists of three fractals. At least I break it into three separate fractals. This first fractal, price moves back up, pulls back, moves back up again, and then moves back down and winds its way down to a point, or moves down and goes flat a little. And then it moves into the next fractal. Price moves back up, it drops, goes sideways, moves back up again, creates this bowl-type structure, and then it kind of just goes flat and sideways, and then it drops. And this one right here doesn't always do that. Sometimes it just moves down instead of going flat and then dropping. So then you have this bounce, and that ends this sideways range-bound time. This little green box is where the bull run structure begins. So after this bull run structure, this is where the chart begins to repeat. So we have price, it moves up to a peak, it then retreats, and then does that wave or topping type structure that it did over here. It then breaks to the downside, does the bounce, which we saw over here. This time was much larger, which brings up an important point. Every time a structure repeats, the idea repeats. However, the timing, the height, and the depth, those do not repeat. Those will always be unique and original to the new iteration. So what that means is you can have a situation just like this, where this bounce was much larger than this bounce, and it can give a appearance of novelty every time the structure repeats. So this brings up the next important point, that every time this structure repeats, it's always going to look unique. It's going to look original, even though it's repeating the basic idea, just like this bounce. For instance, it was much larger than this bounce, and this decline was shorter than this decline, but they both did the same functions. So this analysis is really a study of the functions of fractals. It's not how closely they look one to another. They do tend to look closely when they repeat the same functions, but they will always look original every time they repeat those functions. So after this decline, once again, Casper moves into this sideways range-bound time where we start repeating the same structures. So in this one, it moves up, and this is just one candle. It moves up, and then it moves back down. It moves back up again, declines, goes flat, goes into the next fractal where it moves up, drops, does that bowl-type structure. And this bowl structure is not really, this bottom part here is formed of several waves. It then comes to a peak, and then it declines and comes to, it declines and comes to a low. So here it moved up, did that bowl structure, went flat, and then dropped. This one just winded its way down to a point. It then does the bounce. This bounce terminates the sideways range-bound time, and this green box is where the bull run begins. So this bull run was massive. It was $40. So when it crashed, it really crashed. This is that topping structure or wave-type structure that we see over here. Now I'm going to jump over to TradingView, and I'm going to show you how today's chart, or at least after this decline, how it looks, and we can see where we are in this repetitive macro structure. Okay, so here we are on TradingView, and this is how the chart has progressed since the very large decline from the very large bull run. This decline right here and this bounce is this structure right here where it declines and does this bounce at the bottom, or if you will, this structure right here where it declines and does this bounce at the bottom. After this bounce, it moves up into the sideways range-bound time. We see that first sideways range-bound time fractal right here. Let's zoom in. So as you can see, it moves up, moves back down, and then moves back up again, and then declines in the same way that this one does, where it shoots up in one candle, it then moves down, moves back up again, declines, and goes flat. This structure was quite large. After it declines, it goes flat, and then it enters into the second range-bound structure where price moves up. It declines. We have that bowl-type structure right here. Since this played out on such a large scale, we can see more nuances and details of the two waves, these two waves that create the bottom part of this bowl structure. Here we are zoomed out a little more. So after this bowl structure, price declines in the same way that this structure did. And at last, we enter the final structure, which is the bounce. Now, this bounce has played out on a very large scale. What I'd like to do is I'd like to compare this bounce right here, which was the previous bounce that has taken place on the Casper chart. This is the one that preceded this massive bull run. So I'm over here on charts.cointrader Pro because I can copy this fractal, which took place on a small time frame, and paste it on today's chart. So as you can see, it has some deviations, but it also has some similarities. So you have this first wave, it moves up. Now, these peaks that take place on today's chart, those are more unique to recent history. I'll explain that in a minute. So when this structure first began, we had the first wave, and then it started into this part right here. And this part actually resembles the very first box, this little tiny box right here. This structure has three basic waves, wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3. Wave 3 comes crashing down into wave 1 zone. Well, we had that here with the first wave taking place on a small scale, the second wave, the third wave, which comes to a peak, which comes crashing down into wave 1 zone. All that looked fine, but then it started to deviate. And as this has played out, it's taken its time. It has become clear that this is not the first bull run structure. That is this one, or this little tiny one right here. And with this substantial decline, it has become obvious that it is instead the bounce. So this bounce that ends this sideways range-bound time can be a real doozy of a fractal to go through. As you can see here, it went quite low as well. So we are only repeating history at this point. Now, as you can see, it has been doing this wave right here, which is similar to this. Of course, today's chart has played out on a larger scale, but it is repeating or echoing the same basic idea. This is why I believe that we are at or near the conclusion of this bounce. Now, could it go a little lower? Yes, it could. But if it does, it's not going to be a cataclysmic drop, most likely. It's just going to be the final puttering out of this bounce. So I talked about recent history. Now, when a chart repeats, it tends to copy themes from its recent past. Now, because a chart does this, a recent history fractal can be an excellent guide for what is taking place on today's chart. Now, there's a key point with recent history fractals that you should be aware of, and that is at any point it could stop following it. So while it lasts, it can be a good guide. Now, it's probably going to at some point change, and as you can see, the next structure is the bull run structure. But if we were to copy this fractal, this decline right here, and we were to adjust it for today's timing, height, and depth, looks something like this. So as you can see, it has all the basic parts, the move up, the pull back, this wave right here, it moves back up into another peak, and then it does these waves down. Well, I believe that it's hard to adjust it because the timing's a little different on today's chart, but I believe that we are currently in this final leg. In fact, if we were to copy this part of the fractal right here, just take this part and apply it to here, it would look something like this. So as you can see, there are some deviations such as this, but overall it has been following the basic theme of this decline. Well, it is my belief that we are somewhere near the bottom here. Now, it could potentially drop a little lower. I don't know. The way it's looking at the moment, it could be starting on this. But all that to say is using recent history, which tends to be a fairly decent guide while it lasts, and judging from the repetitive macro structures that have taken place at this point in the chart in the past, all indications point to this being the end of this bounce, which will end the sideways range-bound time that we have been in since August 2021. So this sideways range-bound time has taken a very long time for it to play out. After this, Casper will change gears and it will enter into a bull run structure. Now, I don't know how high this will go. I'm just drawing it so it fits on this screen. It could be here, it could be here, it could be much, much higher. Here is the important truth about Casper. As you can see, these fractals are very different in size. This bounce is much smaller than this bounce. This bounce is smaller than this bounce. I'm showing you this to drive home the point that Casper is a wild card. It can print a very small structure and then print a very large structure. This is what has drawn me to Casper. We don't know how this bull run will print. It could be small, it could be large. However, the only other time that Casper has dipped down very low, that is below this bottoming out structure, was when it printed this massive bull run structure. Now, I'm not saying that today's bull run structure is going to be $40. That is not my point. What I am saying is that historically speaking, if we go by what history shows us, the time that it did drop very low, lower than the bottoming out structure. It didn't do it this time. This bounce was above this bottoming out structure. Today's bounce has gone below the bottoming out structure. The only other time it's done this, which it's done it in the past, so we have a guide to go by, has led to a very nice bull run. Now, it could play out different, but historically speaking, this is our guide. Now, there's another really important concept to understand about Casper. This is the nature of Casper. So Casper has these bull runs, these moves up, these aggressive moves to a peak. It then declines. It then goes into this sideways range-bound time. This sideways range-bound time is a slow grind downwards. It happened again over here. This is fundamental to understand about Casper. So on today's chart, it has been doing the same thing. It is grinding down to a low point. This is the rubber band being pulled back. This is how Casper goes into its bull runs. It drops down low and then it shoots up. Drops down low, then it shoots up. It drops down low, then it shoots up. So all the FUD you hear out there of how Casper is a terrible coin, it is only doing what it has always done. There has been nothing on today's chart that is out of historical norms. Understand that. So just as it's gone through all of this, the first range-bound fractal, the second range-bound fractal, the bounce, and it dropped low in this bounce, lower than this bottoming out structure, all of this is completely historically normal. But what comes after this, when this bounce completes, is going to be the next structure. What is that structure? It's the bull run structure. Now, how high it will go, I don't know. With fractals, you can't judge height because the timing, height, and depth is going to be unique every single time it plays out. But what we do, like I pointed out before, have historical precedent for is the time when it did drop lower than this bottoming out structure, it did go quite high. Knock on wood that we get something like that. It may not do that. I'm just showing you what has happened in the past when it has done this. So folks, whether this is the bottom or we have a little more to go, I believe we are, once again, I'll say it again, at or near the bottom. And you saw all my evidence why that is the case. So what this means is that once this bottoms out, this structure begins. And we don't know how high it will go, but we are at the cusp of good times. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, informative. If you did, feel free to hit that thumbs up button. It's greatly appreciated. My main point with this video is to help you understand the repetitive nature of Casper. The drop low is not anything alarming when you view it in this type of context, which is the historical context. You know, there's narratives and then there is the raw data from history. This is how I invest. If your investment strategy is based off narratives, you're likely going to be someone's lunch. It is my belief that the crypto bull run is going to start soon, but just understand in the bigger picture, the indexes, I've done videos on the Dow, on inflation, on unemployment. All that stuff is pointing to some challenging times. I have a playlist called The Coming Economic Hurricane. You're welcome to watch those videos and understand what I'm talking about. I also have a Patreon where I deep dive into the Casper bull run structure. I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. It's a $5 a month subscription, and the main thing is the Discord that's attached to that Patreon site. We discuss crypto, Casper. People share their charts, and you're welcome to join if it's something that you find interesting. And it's also the best way to stay in touch with me. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. And if you're not yet a subscriber, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart as it continues to develop. Have a great day, and bye for now.